Everyone thinks overtime pushes you into a higher tax bracket and kills your paycheck. But the real math quietly exposes a hidden refund almost nobody ever notices. You ever look at your paycheck after grinding a bunch of overtime and think, bro, where did it all go? Like you worked 12-hour days, skipped dinners, came home half asleep, and somehow the government still took a giant bite out of it. And you sit there doing that awkward little squint at the numbers, tapping your screen like your phone is glitching, trying to convince yourself, nah, this can't be right, they tax the hell out of me. That moment hits different when money is tight, when every extra hour you worked was supposed to cover something, rent, groceries, a bill you've been ignoring. You start thinking, why did I even do overtime? They stole half of it anyway. Here's the funny part. Most people, for years, just carry that belief like it's gospel, like it's this unavoidable financial law of physics. Overtime equals higher tax bracket equals bad. But that's not really what's happening, not even close. My name is David, and I spend way too much time thinking about money, human behavior, and all the weird little myths we absorb without realizing it. And this overtime tax thing might be one of the biggest misunderstandings working people deal with every single year, quietly, silently, without anyone correcting it. I don't blame you for believing the myth. The system feels confusing on purpose. Half the time, the numbers on your paycheck look like they were calculated by someone throwing darts at a board. You see a huge chunk missing after overtime and just assume, yep, they taxed me more. But what if I told you the exact opposite happens? What if I told you the math actually does something sneaky, something almost nobody talks about, something that if you get it, can totally change how you use overtime, plan your money, and understand your taxes? Once you really get this, something clicks. You stop seeing overtime as a financial punishment and start seeing it for what it really is, one of the most predictable, low-risk ways to build a cushion, pay off debt faster, or breathe a little easier. Let's talk about the overtime tax refund nobody's talking about, and why the system feels unfair, even though the actual math tells a very different story. I want to start with the core misunderstanding, the thing almost everyone gets wrong because nobody explains this in plain English. Most people believe, if I work overtime, it bumps me into a higher tax bracket and they take more of my money. Emotionally, that feels true. You look at your pay stub and see a giant chunk gone. It feels like the government saw you working extra and said, oh cool, you're trying to get ahead? Not on my watch. But tax brackets don't work like elevator floors. You don't step onto a new one and suddenly all your income gets taxed at a higher rate. It's more like stacking blocks. The first block of money is taxed at one rate. The next block is taxed at a slightly higher rate. The next block gets a new rate. But you never lose the lower rate blocks. You don't get punished for making more. Still, if that's true, why does your overtime paycheck look smaller? Why does it feel like overtime is taxed more? This is where the math pulls a little trick on you, a psychological trick. Your payroll system estimates your annual income based on that one big check, not your usual checks. So when you get overtime, the system says, okay, if you made this much every pay period, this is how much we'd withhold. It's not taxing you more. It's withholding more. Two very different things. Imagine someone asks to borrow $20 today because they think you'll make $200 this week. But next week, when the real numbers come in, they adjust it, give some back, take some differently. The borrowing changed, not your income. That's withholding. Payroll is basically guessing. Taxes are the final score. And this misunderstanding is where the overtime refund begins. Let's pretend you make $20 an hour and you work 10 hours of overtime this week. Time and a half means you made $30 per hour for those extra hours. So you made an extra $300, but your paycheck looks like only $180 of that survived after taxes. Feels like robbery, right? But here's the kicker. You didn't lose it. You just didn't keep it this week. At the end of the year, when the system sees your actual total income, it corrects itself. It refunds the difference. It gives back the over-withholding. That missing overtime money shows up in your tax refund, buried inside the total, hidden from awareness. Most people never connect it. They say, damn, nice refund this year, and man, overtime kills me. I barely take anything home, without realizing those two sentences are connected. The refund is the overtime you thought you lost. This is the quiet part the system never explains. Let me tell you a real story. A guy I used to work with at a factory years ago, big dude named Mark, was convinced overtime wasn't worth it. Every Friday he'd complain, "They steal half my overtime. I'm not giving the government free money." So he refused OT every time. Meanwhile, another guy, Jordan, skinny dude, always wearing beat-up Vans, worked every overtime hour they offered. He practically lived at the plant. Every year at tax time, guess what happened? Jordan walked in with a grin and said, "Bro, I got a crazy refund this year." Mark never understood, never connected the dots, never realized the reason Jordan's refunds were huge was because of that lost overtime money earlier in the year. The payroll system took too much out during those big OT weeks and quietly gave it back later. It's like overtime gets taxed in slow motion. You feel the pain today, you feel the benefit months later, and emotionally, they never seem connected. But the math connects them perfectly. The human brain does something funny with money. We feel short-term losses more intensely than long-term gains. Lose $50 today? Painful. Get $50 3 months later? Barely notice it. This is why refunds feel like a bonus instead of your own money returning home. Our brains process paychecks emotionally, not mathematically. When you see less money on Friday, it hurts. Your brain doesn't go, "Oh, it's okay, I'll get some of this back in 8 months. No, your brain goes, "They stole from me." Overtime pain is immediate. The refund reward is delayed. And human nature? We're terrible at connecting delayed rewards. That's why this misunderstanding survives. Let's break the math down. Payroll uses an estimated tax rate. Overtime weeks make payroll think you make more annually. Payroll withholds more than necessary. The IRS adjusts everything at the end. You get the difference back as part of your refund. Nothing about overtime moves your actual tax bracket unless your year-end total crosses a threshold. Even then, only the dollars above the bracket change, not all your income. So the idea that your overtime gets taxed at 40% isn't real. It just looks like that because withholding is temporarily inflated. When you understand this, something shifts. Overtime becomes predictable. It becomes a tool instead of a punishment. You can use it to pay off debt faster, build a savings cushion, cover emergencies, create breathing room, and escape paycheck-to-paycheck life. Even if your paycheck feels smaller during overtime weeks, your annual income silently grows. Your refund grows. Your financial stability grows. Overtime is like planting seeds. You don't see all the benefits immediately, but the harvest comes. Overtime isn't always worth it. There are situations where it genuinely doesn't add up. Low OT rate, childcare, transportation, fatigue costs, burnout risk, health suffering, complicated bonus structures. But even then, the tax myth isn't the reason. The hours may not be worth it for you personally, but not because of tax brackets. Understanding the overtime refund relationship lets you play the game smarter. You can purposely use overtime-heavy months to pay debt, use the refund as forced savings, stack cash for a big purchase, build a safety net, pay off that credit card haunting you. You shift from emotional reactions to strategic decisions. Strategy separates "I'm always struggling" from "I'm finally getting ahead." There's a moment when you get this deeply, not just intellectually, and it changes how you see money. You start to see your paycheck differently. You start to see taxes differently. You stop feeling like the system is out to get you. It's like looking at a blurry picture your whole life and suddenly seeing it in HD. Overtime didn't steal from you. It just borrowed from your Friday so it could pay you back in April. I'll end with a small confession. Years ago, I genuinely believed overtime was a trap. I believed the same myth everyone else did. One night, doing the math at 2 a.m., desperate to understand where my money was going, the truth hit me like a brick. I wasn't being punished. I was being refunded. Because the timing felt unfair, I assumed the math was unfair. And that's when I realized something bigger. So many financial frustrations come down to timing, not mistreatment. Overtime taxes weren't the enemy. My misunderstanding was. If there's one thing I want you to walk away with, it's this. You're not getting punished for working hard. You're just dealing with a timing issue. Overtime isn't taxed more. It just gets withheld differently. That withholding eventually finds its way back to you. Understanding this takes you from feeling powerless to feeling informed. A massive emotional shift. When you stop believing overtime is not worth it, you open doors. You start seeing opportunity where you used to see frustration. You start optimizing your money instead of resenting it. This isn't just about taxes, it's about how we experience life. We all have moments where the effort doesn't show immediate results, where the reward comes later, where we feel like our hard work disappears into a void. But a lot of the time, just like with overtime, the benefits come back around, quietly, unexpectedly, often right when we need them most. So if you've been avoiding overtime because it doesn't pay, maybe give it another look. Not blindly, not aggressively, just with fresh eyes and better information. Your hours are worth more than you think. Your effort goes further than you realize. The system, as confusing as it feels, isn't stealing your overtime. It's holding on to it temporarily, waiting for the year to finish so it can give it back. Take this knowledge and use it. Plan smarter, work strategically, build toward the version of your life that feels stable, secure, and intentional. The truth is simple. When you understand the real math, you get to make real decisions. That's how people move forward. Quietly, consistently, intentionally. One paycheck, one overtime shift, one smarter choice at a time.